The CBS Sports HQ training camp tour continues, and on Friday it made a stop in the Windy City to check in on Caleb Williams, getting set for his second year leading the Bears franchise and looking to lead the team to their first playoff appearance since 2020. But it was another position group that shined in Chicago. Our crew at Hallis Hall has more.
Brian McFadden, Kyle Long, CBS Sports coming to you from Chicago Bears training camp, where, Kyle, we got an opportunity to see joint practices with the Chicago Bears and the Miami Dolphins as they get ready for their first preseason game this Sunday. When you look at the entire day of work for both organizations, what stood out to you?
Well, it was a line of scrimmage for me. You know, I showed up to practice thinking about the quarterbacks and Rome Odunze, Luther Burden, DJ Moore, but I left there talking about that defensive front for the Chicago Bears and how they have a multitude of winners there, guys who can drive offensive lines crazy. And I know that the back end is very talented for the Bears, but I think that defensive line is going to be trouble for some units in the NFC North this year.
I agree with you. I think Dennis Allen, you can say whatever you want to say about his inability to be very, very successful as a head coach, but what he brings on the defensive side has been felt throughout his coaching career, along with the personnel that you mentioned. I think this would be a very, very talented defensive team. And when you look at the Miami Dolphins, you know, you look at Tua Tagovailoa, kind of under the same pressure meter, similar to what we see with Caleb Williams. It's all about the rhythm. We saw the rhythm a little bit, but we saw some untimely interceptions as well for the Miami Dolphins. But in all, two teams that are very, very talented, especially on the offensive side. When you look at some of their skill positional players, this is a very, very important year for either organization. And let's see how things get rolling for them as they get ready for their first preseason game this Sunday here in Chicago. It's Brian McFadden, Kyle Long, CBS Sports.
A very, very important year indeed, as we are now joined by CBS Sports NFL analysts John Breech and Tyler Sullivan as we enter year 2 of the Caleb Williams era in Chicago, and hopefully a big turnaround from a season ago, but we won't get a peek of this offense at least this week, as head coach Ben Johnson announced Williams and most starters will not play in this weekend's exhibition matchup against the Dolphins. Now, for a system with a new coach and a new offensive coordinator and still a very young signal caller at the helm, Breech, is this the right move for Chicago?
I am surprised by this. I understand that it's been a philosophy for years around the NFL, is a lot of coaches decided, hey, it's not worth playing our starters in the preseason because we don't want to risk injury to them. Sean McVay, I don't think, has ever played a starter in the preseason. But in this specific situation, and really around the NFL this year, we've seen starters play. Joe Burrow played for the Bengals. Kyler Murray's going to play for the Cardinals. The Panthers are sending out their starters. So it's become something that's being done on a more regular basis. And if I'm a new head coach with a quarterback who is learning a new offense, and you've got basically a new offensive line in front of them, I want all those guys a chance to build some chemistry, to gel. So I'm absolutely would have sent them out there for this first preseason game. Now, maybe Ben Johnson's plan is to say, hey, you know what? We've got a second preseason game out here next week. We'll let them get a bunch of snaps then. But if I was running the Bears, I probably would have let them get out there and get a series or two of action. So I was a little bit surprised that Johnson decided to keep the starters on the sideline for this game.
Yeah, I'll co-sign that with Breech. I think that they should have played their starters in this game. I think that when you're installing a new offense, and reports out of Chicago that it's been a bit clunky for Caleb Williams. There have been some good. There's also been some bad. That Fan Fest last weekend, the takeaway was that Caleb Williams didn't look that good. There were some pre-snap penalties. There were some missed time throws. So to me, that would suggest that you would want to get as many reps as possible. Again, this is the preseason. You're supposed to work out the kinks during games that don't really mean anything. So I'd like to see, again, the joint practices are fine, but they do play the preseason for a reason. I would like to see Caleb Williams and the starters out there a little bit, and Breech kind of pointed to it. You are seeing that across the league in certain pockets, and you can look at last night as a perfect example. The Cincinnati Bengals have made it an emphasis to play their starters because they've gone out to slow starts during the regular season. So you saw Joe Burrow, you saw Jamar Chase for an extended period of time. On the flip side, the Philadelphia Eagles, they didn't play their starters because they're coming off a Super Bowl championship. They don't need to play Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown. I feel like the Chicago Bears are more in the Cincinnati Bengals bucket. They need to play their starters to get off on a strong foot, because the first couple of games in the season for the Chicago Bears are the Minnesota Vikings and the Detroit Lions, two divisional opponents. You need to start the year out hot, so you'd probably want to work things out in the preseason.
Yeah, I think you guys are spot on. You want these guys to get as many reps as possible, and this is no Joe Flacco, 40 30-year-old veteran that's under center. This is still your second-year quarterback that you're still trying to develop. But as we speak about him, I mean, it's no doubt that a big key for this Bears turnaround is going to be that growth and development for Caleb Williams in year 2. And it might help that the young signal caller is tied with head coach Ben Johnson, who's been widely referred to as an offensive genius leading the way. So Williams spoke about his progression so far with this Bears offense.
You know, it's just it's fun, it's challenging, you know, and we're gaining, you know, I'm gaining more knowledge and coaches gaining more knowledge on me and how I play, and you know, connecting those two things, and then just, you know, the constant communication, open communication in those situations, off the field, on the sideline in games and things like that is, you know, where it's going to be at, and you know, where we're going to keep growing.
Want to keep growing, keep building that communication. But fellas, listen, I'm going to call a spade here, because the storyline that has haunted the Bears fans for over a century is that no quarterback has ever thrown for over 4,000 yards. Caleb Williams, he has expressed that it is his goal to achieve this milestone. So does it happen this year, Breech?
Well, like you said, every Bears quarterback, I feel like, has said this for the last 93 years, and none of them have managed to do it. So it is interesting. I think when you look at what Ben Johnson's bringing to the Bears, I don't know that that's going to equal Caleb Williams throwing for 4,000 yards. Because you look at what he did in Detroit last season. Well, he had this powerful offensive line. He really liked to emphasize the run game, and that kind of set up the passing attack. And that worked really well because the Lions had a great offensive line, great running backs, and great wide receivers. Now, he doesn't have the same exact personnel in Chicago, obviously, so I think it's going to be difficult to kind of replicate that success. But what the Bears did do is upgrade their offensive line, which is something they absolutely had to do, because Caleb Williams got sacked 68 times last season. That was the most in the NFL. Nobody's throwing for 4,000 yards when they're getting sacked 68 times. So the fact that the offensive line is going to be better, I think Johnson's going to emphasize the rushing attack to set up the passing game. So I do think Caleb Williams can have a big season, but I think he'll fall just short of 4,000 yards.
Breech, cards on the table. I may or may not have a future for Caleb Williams to pass for over 4,000 yards for the upcoming season. So I'm a little bit more bullish than you, because I do like exactly what the Chicago Bears have done this offseason. Started off with Ben Johnson. I think stylistically, it's a really great fit. Obviously, he's commended as an offensive mind. He really helped the resurgence of Jared Goff in Detroit. But you look at some of the things specifically. One of the things that the Detroit Lions did a lot last season was play action. That they ran in more than any other team in the NFL last season. The Chicago Bears, they ranked 30th in play action plays a year ago. But if you look at what Caleb Williams was able to do when he was working under play action, he was extremely explosive. His yards per pass attempt were higher. His explosive play rate was higher with play action. So even just that small sample size is an indicator that things are on the up and up here with Ben Johnson now running the offense. And then you talk about what they did on the personnel side, as you referenced, Breech. They fixed the offensive line, specifically along the interior. Joe Thuney, Jonah Jackson, two of the best guards in the NFL. They made Drew Dahlman one of the highest paid centers in the NFL. They've invested at the tackle position. So I think that Caleb Williams is going to be far more protected. And as you guys referenced, that's going to be light years in terms of improvement of what he dealt with a year ago. Tied for the third most sacks, not just for a rookie, but in NFL history for a single season. And then you talk about Colston Loveland in the first round. You have Luther Burden in the second round on top of DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. So there's a lot to like here for the Chicago Bears offense.
I'm just glad, order of business number one, take care of that O-line to protect your investment. So hopefully this yields better results for Caleb Williams there. But guys, let's look back a year, because the Bears, they were a 5-win team last year, and we've seen their struggles on offense. They made some changes, as you guys mentioned, to that O-line in particular, that interior, and with their first 3 picks in the draft, lending itself to the offense. But Tyler, now what are your expectations then for this team this time around?
So I put my cards on the table that I think that Caleb Williams is going to be a 4,000-yard passer, and I put my money on it. I also put my money on the Chicago Bears to make the playoffs. Now, I am very bullish on the Chicago Bears in 2025. Obviously, an extremely tough division. I don't believe that they will win the NFC North. I think they get in as a wild card team, so I do have them going over this win total. And the reason why is because, obviously, like I just mentioned, the improvements on the offensive side of the ball, Caleb Williams going into year 2. too. Ben Johnson being that offensive guru, that's great. But Kyle Long even talked about it in the hit leading up to our segment here. The defense is what I'm excited about with the Chicago Bears. Last season, and again, they've improved, they've added pieces, but last season they were a near top 10 unit to getting off the field on third down. And this one might surprise you. They were fantastic in the red zone last season. They ranked third in red zone efficiency last season. When opponents got into the red area, they weren't an automatic touchdown. And if that continues this season, I think the Chicago Bears could be an extremely stout defense, an improved offense that could result in a playoff berth.
We got Tyler here drinking the Bears Kool-Aid. Man, that is betting on them to make the playoffs is pretty wild. Look, the Bears are definitely more talented than they were last season. So on paper, they are absolutely a better team. However, I am not as optimistic as Tyler. I do not think they are going to make the playoffs. As a matter of fact, I'm not even sure if they're going to finish over 500. My main reason for that is we just saw it a couple minutes ago, and it's the schedule. They have one of the most brutal schedules in the NFL this year. Just as far as strength of schedule goes, it's the second most difficult. And one reason for that is they play 11 games against teams that finished above 500 last season. That is tied for the second most in the NFL. You look at their closing stretch. If they're in the playoff hunt at the end of the season, they have the Packers, the 49ers, and the Lions over the last 3 weeks. They've got the Vikings, Steelers, Eagles, Packers in a row. I mean, it's just such a brutal schedule all over the place. The Ravens and Bengals in back-to-back weeks in Week 8 and Week 9. Every time I look at the schedule, I have a hard time finding 9 wins for the Bears. So I do think it's possible they overachieve, but they are going to have to be shockingly good to make the playoffs this year. So I'm going to say under 500, maybe 8 and 9.
Okay, that's fair. We're on two ends of the spectrum here on this one, but you also got to throw in, you talked about those 11 games against teams above 500, then also just the NFC North and how tough that division alone is going to be. It's going to be a tall task for the Bears, but hey, like you mentioned, Tyler drinking that Chicago Kool-Aid, and it's tasting pretty nice. We'll see how everything takes shape. Tyler, John, thank you guys so much. Well, Vegas at least sees a better year for Chicago this season. Their win total set at 7.5, plus 176 to make the playoffs, plus 500 to win the NFC North. That's something they haven't done since 2018. Plus 2,000 odds to take that NFC title, and plus 3,900. I mean, if you believe the Bears can bring home their first Lombardi since 1986.